Okay, so we're going to talk about the square root method, and we're solving quadratics, but it's very specific to certain types. There's three types that this is useful for. So please write this down. So the square root method is used when a perfect square equals a value. There's three types. So three types. Oops. Okay. So like I said, this is very specific, but then Wednesday we're going to learn something called completing the square that's going to allow us to do what we're going to do today to any type of quadratic. And then we're going to do it to a specific general form of the quadratic, and then that's going to give us a formula that works for anything. Okay, so let's talk about what these three types are. Type number one. Type one, let's call it. And that one is x squared equals a value. Okay, so as an example, let's say something like x squared equals 20. This is the most basic type of quadratic you can have. X squared equals some number, okay? That's type one. Type two. Type two is when the middle term is missing. Bless you. That should be middle term is missing. Let's look at an example of that. So it would be something like, for example, 2x squared minus 5 equals 13. Write that down. Do you see what I mean by middle term? There's no like 2x or 5x or x. Normally we'd have x squared, then the linear term, something with x. And so the middle term is missing. And then the last type, type 3, is a squared binomial. Binomial. So an example of that would be something like x minus 6. Here's my binomial. Squared equals 10. Okay, so go ahead and write these down. These three examples. And the thing is, this one's already isolated. I could get my x squared by itself. I have my x squared by itself. In the second one right here, I can do a little algebra and get this x squared by itself. In the last example, in this type 3, I do have something that's squared all by itself. X minus 6, it's squared, and I could get it by itself. Okay? So if you have a squared term by itself, here's what I can do to solve it. I can undo the squaring. How do I undo the squaring? What's the opposite of squaring? Yeah, square rooting. I see what you mean by dividing by itself. Usually we call it square rooting. Because if I do this, I get my answers. And I say that plural, answers, because there's two. Anybody know what the answers are here? Yeah. Remember, when you take a square root, you get two answers, the negative and the positive. When we're solving equations, we want all the possible answers. So there are two. Okay? So the answers are going to be x equals, we'll do it the shortcut way, plus and minus the square root of 20. However, based on what we learned Friday, every time we write an answer with a square root, we got to look out to see if we can simplify it. Can I simplify 20? 4 and 5, right? So this is x equals plus or minus square root of 4 times 5, right? Because that's what 20 is. All right. Hamilton, close the Chromebook, please. Close it up completely. Thank you. What's the square root of 20? Square root of 4. 2. So my final answer, and there's two of them, 2 square root of 5. 2 radical 5. But remember, there's two answers. I'm not always going to write them separately, but you need to realize when I write this, this means x equals 2 radical 5 and x equals negative 2 square root of 5. Okay? I'm not always going to write them separately. Quite often, I'm just going to leave it with a plus minus. But that means we have two separate answers. Okay? So those are my two answers. Plus minus 2 radical 5. Any questions? Okay, so I just want to make it clear that there's two ways to write the answers. But from now on, if you leave the answers radical 20 when we could have broken it down like I just did, it's not going to be correct. You have to simplify it. Okay? Okay. Let's try the next one. How can I get x squared by itself? 5. Yeah. Get rid of the 5. Okay, so just solve it like you would an equation. So I get 2x squared equals 18. Now get rid of the 2. Divide by 2. X squared equals 9. Now just take the square root of this. What am I going to get? That's just one answer. You could say 3 and negative 3, or if you're kind of lazy like me, plus minus 3. There's your two answers. It's 3 and negative 3, but we'll just write it as plus or minus 3. Okay? So there you go. So sometimes you just get regular integer answers. Okay. And then you're going to get some weird stuff like this one. So I have a squared binomial, right? And I want to get just x. I want x equals something. What do you think my next move is to get there? Well, I can't get, it's trapped inside the parentheses, which means it's squared first. How do I get rid of the squaring? Yeah. Anything that's squared, guys, you could square root it. And okay, so that gives me just x minus 6 equals square root of 10. Here's the catch. Once you take that square root, it's mandatory. You have to do the plus minus. And can I break up 10 into anything? It's just 2 times 5, right? Neither 2 or 5 are perfect squares. So it stays square root of 10. This one stays square root of 10. That should always be kind of in your thoughts from now on. Once you take a square root, okay, can I break this down? Can I pull out a perfect square from 10? No. So just leave it plus minus, okay? And I'm almost there. Yeah, now I get rid of the 6. And treat the square root as a variable, okay? So this is how I write this answer. X equals, I got a 6, and then I'm going to add and subtract square root of 10. So here's my answers. I got positive 6. Guys, make sure you're paying attention. I got positive 6. And then I have add the square root of 10, but I'm also going to subtract the square root of 10. So this is 2 separate answers. Normally I don't split it up, but since this is the first time you're ever seeing this, here are my 2 answers. X equals 6 plus the square root of 10. I would take 6 and add whatever the square root of 10 is. And the other answer is X equals 6, and I use the minus. Take away square root of 10. That would be the 2 solutions. 6 plus square root of 10, 6 take away square root of 10. Okay? So, but normally, can we agree that this is 2 answers from now on, guys? And this is what they are. The first number plus the square root, the first number minus the square root. Those are the 2 answers. Okay? All right. Any questions? Is that hard? Okay, it's kind of putting together just a bunch of things we've learned in the last few days. Okay. So let's solve a few of these. Okay, number 1. X squared minus 10 equals 0. Number 2. 4x squared minus 8 equals 0. Number 3. X plus 5 squared equals 144. Okay, sorry. Let's push this up so you can see it better. Go ahead and write those down. So let's solve them. Isolate the squared number. Isolate the squared value. So we want to get the squared value all by its lonesome. Yeah. So I got x squared equals positive 10. Okay, finish it up. Tell me the answers. In the meantime, if you finish that quickly, we'll work on the next one. Okay. Someone care to tell us what they got for number 1? Right.
X and minus the square root of 10.
So there's your two answers. X equals plus or minus square root of 10. All right. How about the number 2? What are we going to do there? Yeah, let's get rid of the 8. So we got 4x squared equals 8 divided by 2. Oh, divided by 4. I'm thinking of the answer. So I get x squared equals 2. So I get x equals plus or minus square root of 2. Now remember, in reality, what kind of number is my answer? What number are we really looking at? Why are we just leaving them in the square roots?
Oh, because the only way I can get the square root is if you multiply it by 1.
Yeah. And take a look at this answer. Here's square root of 2 as a square root of 2. But if I try to estimate it with my calculator, look at the actual answer. It's going to be some irrational number that goes on forever and ever usually. And yeah, it's not a perfect square, which we like. It's an imperfect square. And you get these ugly answers. So that's why we usually leave it as a square root. This is the exact answer. What I had on my calculator was an approximation. So we leave it as square roots. That's why we left this one as square root. Okay, what are we going to do to number 3? Yeah, square root, radicalize it. And this one is not so bad, though. We get x plus 5 equals positive or negative 12. So put plus or minus 12. This one's not in the square root because 144, as we all know, is a perfect square. So you get an integer answer. You get 12 and negative 12. So now let's solve it. Get rid of the 5. Yeah. So I'm going to write it like this to begin with. X equals negative, I got this negative, right? Negative 5 plus or minus 12. Now, if you leave it this way when there's no square root, you won't get full credit. You haven't really finished everything. Technically, we have to do or not technically, we have to do this. We have to do negative 5 plus 12 and negative 5 take away 12. Okay? We got to do, because we can get actual integer answers. If you can go all the way to integer answers, you have to say, okay, negative 5 and 12, what's that, 7? And negative 5 minus 12, that's negative 17. So if you can go all the way to actual answers, that's the route we have to go. All right. Okay, any questions? Okay. Couple more things. Let me give you one with a few more bells and whistles. How's that? So these have a few more things we have to work out. Let's see here. This would be number 4. 3 parentheses x minus 5 squared plus 11 equals 23. Okay. So what can I do? You want to isolate the square root or the squared number.
Would you radical with this? Or
Well, I can't get to that until I get rid of a 3 and the 11. If you got stuff there, if you don't have the square part all by itself, either x squared or a squared binomial. So I want to get rid of all this other stuff so I get to this. Or if it was just x squared, I would do that, yes.
Subtract the constant.
Yeah, so it's like a two-step equation. Subtract the constant. So take away 11. So I got 3 parentheses x minus 5 squared, that's the squared binomial, equals 12. Okay, now what? Yeah.
Divide by 3.
Yeah, divide by 3. I know our urge is to distribute, but because it's not just a parentheses, it's squared. We can't distribute, just divide out the coefficient. It's like a two-step equation. So we end up with x minus 5 squared equals 4. Okay. Now we have this squared part all by itself. It's a binomial. Now we can, yeah. And that way we get rid of this. We get x minus 5 equals plus or minus 2. That's the part you got to get comfortable with. Once you take the square root, whatever it equals has to be plus or minus because you have two possibilities. Okay? All right. So let's write down what it's going to be. Get rid of this 5. And we get x equals 5 plus or minus 2. So we get two answers. X equals 5 plus 2. So I get 7. And I get x equals 3. 5 minus 2. Okay? All right. All right. Any questions? All right. So now, after I've said this, can you open the door, please? I'm going to give you one that's going to be a little different. While they're doing that, I want to remind you guys of something that we did a while back, and that's factoring squared binomials. I'm going to show you the pattern. A squared plus 2 times AB plus B squared equals A plus B squared. Write that down. Does that look familiar? And then A squared minus 2 times AB plus B squared equals A minus B squared. If you remember, we called these squared binomials. And the reason we want to do this is, I'll give you an example. Okay? Suppose I give you the following, and we want to solve this. X squared plus 12x plus 36 equals 7. Go ahead and write that down. And we want to solve this. Well, this looks totally different from what we've done before, right? it's totally different from what we've done before. Um, one thing we could do is try to solve it by factoring. And what would we do to do that? We would take away 7 from both sides, and this would become 29, right? Take away 7 here, take away 7 there, and that gives us 29, right? Are there two numbers that multiply to 29 and add up to 12? No, right? Because 29 times 1 is the only thing that factors it for 29, and it's not going to give you 12. So we can't solve it by factoring, but we can solve it. This particular polynomial fits this pattern. Remember? This is your A, X is your A, and then what would be your B? What's the square root of 36? 6. What's 6 times 2? It's right there. Remember how we did that? So this is my A, it's X. My B is the square root of 36, which is 6. And so I want A plus B. So instead of writing this as x squared plus 12x plus 36, I can write this as a squared binomial. What's the square root of x squared? So that would go here. What's the square root of 36? 6, right? And then since I have a plus here, since this is a plus, it follows this pattern. And I put a plus. So plus 6. So this became this. And now you could solve it by the method we just learned with the square root method. Okay? So let's just finish it up. Cancels. So what's the final answers? Well, we'll get there. Yeah, we're almost there. Get rid of the 6 though. X equals, well, I got a minus 6, so what goes first? Negative 6 plus or minus square root of 7. So there's my two answers. Negative 6 plus square root of 7, negative 6 minus square root of 7. Okay? We're going to do a couple like this. You got to just recognize the pattern. And what you want to do is look at the trinomial. If it has a minus, then you have a minus here. Okay? If it has a plus, then you have a plus there. All right? So we're going to do 2 more, and they're going to be like this one. Okay? Okay, here we go. Should I do it on? Yeah, I'll do it on. Okay, I got to start preserving paper. Okay, so 2 more and then we're done. Yeah, were we at number 4? So this is number 5. Okay, so here we go. X squared minus 16x plus 64 equals 49. And number 6, x squared plus 10x plus 25 equals 8. All right. So let's this fits the pattern, right? What's the square root of x squared? X. What's the square root of 64? 8. 8 times x times 2 is 16. So it's right there. So it fits this pattern. And it's a minus. So it's x minus square root of 64 is 8. Okay. Okay, that's what we have. Square root this. That gets rid of this guy. So x take away 8 equals plus or minus what? 7. Okay. Oops. So let's get rid of this 8 and the plus 8. So basically we have x equals 8 plus or minus 7. So let's write down what our answers are. We have 8 plus 7. And then we have 8 minus 7. 15 and 1. Okay. Let's try the other one. This also fits that pattern. What goes inside? X plus 5. Square root of x squared is x. Square root of 25 is 5. 2 times x times 5 is 10x. So x plus 5. Okay. So now we can take the square root of this. And then we've got x plus 5 equals plus or minus square root of 8. Or you could just think ahead and say, wait a minute, that's 4 times 2, and 4 is a perfect square. Do you want to do that right away or do it at the end? Right now? Okay. Just remember then, this is 4 times 2. And the square root of 4 is 2. So this turns out to be 2 radical 2. Because you basically take the square root of this and 4 comes out. That's 2. Okay? And now just get rid of the 5. To cancel this. And we get an answer. X equals. Well, before we do that, negative 5. That's just negative, no positive or negative. It's minus 5, and that's it. Negative 5, and then positive or negative. And there's my 2 answers. Okay? Any questions? All right. So this is what we're going to work on. I got a Cami, so I'll give you a sheet.